Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni received the commander of Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, at the State House at Entebbe on Friday. This in a bid to facilitate dialogue and end the ongoing conflict in Sudan. With the war between the RSF and the Sudanese army entering its third year and multiple ceasefires having failed, regional and African-led efforts are under the spotlight. Joining us to provide analysis on these developments in South Sudan is a South Sudan-based political analyst and civil society activist, Edmund Yakani. Edmund, thank you for joining us and good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning for having me.
Thanks. It's our pleasure, and thanks for making time. What is the significance of President Yoweri Museveni meeting RSF leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo at State House in Entebbe?
Thank you. This comes in the phase where, if you can remember, when the conflict broke out in Sudan, Sudan membership with the AU was freezed. Later on, Sudan quit IGAD. In the recent AU head of state and government summit, which was held less than 2 weeks ago in Addis Ababa, Sudan decided to return for full membership with AU and IGAD. And immediately, the RSF leader met with Museveni. This offers an opportunity for dialogue. This offers an opportunity for mediation. But everything is so much determined by the political will that Sudanese warring parties leaders want. If they don't want dialogue, whatever Museveni is doing, it may not help. If Burhan doesn't want, that will not go anywhere. So I think for me, it is really the political will of Sudanese leaders in terms of accepting dialogue or mediation. And as I said, Museveni may create that opportunity, but it still depends on Sudanese leaders. But of course, there's other reasons behind the meeting of Museveni and the nicknamed leader of RSF, known as Himeti. Of course, that meeting have certain reasons behind it, and the reasons have to be linked with the United Arab Emirates' role in the Horn of Africa in relation to peace and security. We are aware that United Arab Emirates is becoming one of the Gulf states that undermine peace and stability in the Horn of Africa by aiding revolutions or by taking side revolutions. What is the interest? Nobody knows, but what we know from the perspective of South Sudan is that UAE is looking for agricultural land. So it's for the best interest of UAE not to see any functional government or state in the Horn of Africa for their own best interest.
So how does the ongoing conflict between the RSF and the Sudanese army affect the prospects of lasting peace when it comes to Sudan?
When it comes to Sudan, you need to understand who is behind RSF. You need to understand who is behind Sudan Armed Forces. And remember, there were several attempts that were carried out, and it ended up no breakthrough. US came in, it was in the Gulf. African Union tried, they couldn't break through simply because Sudan is facing a proxy war from external actors, and specifically UAE and Qatar and the Saudis.
Can Uganda's efforts and African-led mediation more broadly realistically succeed? I mean, if we're saying that international efforts have failed to get, these multiple ceasefires to stay in place, can we see that succeeding where previous ceasefires and international initiatives have failed?
Obviously, African-led solutions to African problem is the best approach, in the sense that we treat ourselves as brothers. So the attitude of bullying, the attitude of oppressing and imposing will not be there because we share the continent and we have one value. But unfortunately, Sudanese leaders, are they ready for that? Are they willing to accept such process? Will they commit themselves to such process? Obviously, from my angle, from my point of view, is still Sudanese warring parties leaders are so vulnerable for external actors that pushes them to what they want rather than what actually Sudanese citizens want from their leaders, who claim to be one day in the future to be the servants of Sudanese citizens. Unfortunately, right now, all their actions are disastrous. All their actions are horrific on the common interest of Sudanese citizens.
What kind of impact then do you see this dialogue having on the humanitarian crisis in Sudan?
Obviously, it offers an opportunity for improving the humanitarian situation, and this may help in really mobilizing, though we know that the shrinking humanitarian aid, the little available humanitarian aid may reach to the vulnerable Sudanese in various parts of Sudan as they're facing starvation, they're facing hunger. So I think if this dialogue is taken up seriously by the warring parties of Sudan, and then it will help in reaching out to the vulnerable people through the help or through the assistance of the humanitarian goodwill actors.
And what does this tell us about regional working together or regional leadership and diplomacy then? And I wonder, because this has been a worsening crisis over the past 3 years, and one wonders if there is will within the region to step in and not just step in, but to ensure that those processes are followed through of trying to reach some kind of a peace deal or ceasefire.
Obviously, the regional will and the regional commitment, it is also driven by vested interests of the member states of the region. As you said, Sudan crisis didn't start now. And remember, when Sudan crisis is going on already, Sudan is in tension with Ethiopia over the dump of Ethiopia, and Egypt is backing up Sudan. And when you look at the angle of South Sudan, by then we had a crisis with Sudan from the perspective of South Sudan. And besides these, as the Sudanese warring parties are effectively influenced by the vested interest of the member states of Africa, as I said, also external actors come in. Also, some member states start opening an open policy window for aiding military assistance or military aid to the warring parties. For instance, there are evidence coming out very clear that UAE is supplying ammunition to RSF through Uganda. There's that accusation coming out, and evidence are coming out very clear because UAE tried through Kenya, and it happened that Sudan armed forces were able to bomb 2 cargos that left Nairobi to Niala. So it seems from an intelligence perspective, Sudanese intelligence are getting information about the cargo supply or logistic supply of RSF from Kenya. So they switched to Uganda, and seems Uganda is using by land through South Sudan. So those vested interests, it undermines regional peace and security. And that sometimes when you start asking the region, what do you mean by regional peace and security? The interpretation of regional peace and security differs from one member state to another within the region. So African leaders, when they say we need to provide African solution to African problems, also it requires African acceptance, because sometimes we are enemies of our own. We facilitate wars because we need to gain certain returns that benefit us as a leaders of one member state. So vested interest among the member states of African Union may make the process for peace and mediation in Sudan prolonged.
So let's look ahead then. What would you like to see happen in terms of the RSF and the Sudanese army moving towards inclusive and sustainable peace? What are the steps they need to take?
Obviously, African Union have a primary responsibility. IGAD have a primary responsibility to undertake a coordinated regional and international consensus point of view of finding solutions to the crisis in Sudan. The crisis in Sudan, you can't find from one particular actor in the region or in the global community. You need a coordinated regional and international efforts that aid to facilitate mediation and dialogue. You don't need to see one member state somewhere opening a window policy for supporting war, or within the region or within the continent or within the global community. So you need to see that AU, IGAD, UN, and the Gulf, they all coordinate efforts to find peace in Sudan.
Right. We're going to leave it there for now, Edmund, and thank you so much for your valuable analysis and insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That was Edmund Yakani, South Sudan-based political analyst and civil society activist, sharing his insights on Sudan's conflict and Uganda's role in facilitating dialogue between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army. That remains to be seen whether realistically when we talk about African solutions to African problems that can succeed where previous ceasefires and international initiatives have failed. It's been ongoing, worsening humanitarian crisis in Sudan. I think we speak about this almost every week, and it's been over the past 3 years that has been happening. So we'll see what that impact and this dialogue could have. They're meeting at State House there in Entebbe, or they've met actually already on Friday. President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, having received the commander of Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces. That's Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo.